syndrome or Wermer syndrome or MEN1, MEN2. These all are the names given for multiple endocrine neoplasia. So multiple endocrine neoplasia, when one is this is inherited disease, which is characterized by tumors development in the pituitary gland, parathyroid gland, and pancreas. So the condition is associated with the release of these hormones which are released from these areas. And the condition can be associated with adrenal nodules, neuroendocrine tumors of the lungs, thymus or stomach, and benign skin conditions. So these all areas and all the organs like pituitary gland, parathyroid gland, pancreas, adrenal, neuroendocrine, lungs, thymus, and stomach and skin. These all lesions they are linked with this disease. So this is very important topic. Multiple endocrine. That is why that this is given the name multiple endocrine neoplasia because this is involving multiple organs like pituitary, parathyroid, pancreas, adrenal, so all lungs, thymus, stomach, skin. So the signs and symptoms they will be related to the area involved. Causes of multiple men one is this is a genetic defect, and there is the gene is found in chromosome 11. We know the chromosomes; these all things are made up of proteins. So the chromosome 11, there are tiny multiple dot-like structures which are called gene. So on chromosome 11, this is the gene. This gene is defective, and its job is to produce. The function of chromosome 11 is to produce protein menin. So the faults or spelling mistakes here or some type of mutations. Mutations mean there is change in the setting of the gene. So this is found in 90% of the patients with MEN1. So in some patients and their families with this condition, a gene fault still cannot be found. It means that the etiology is still unclear. So the major, in 90% of the patient, they found that there is a mutation in the gene on chromosome number 11. But still, in most of the patients, they cannot find the actual cause. The mutation results in failure. When there is mutation, it results in failure to produce the correct menin because the gene function is to produce menin. So when there is mutation in the chromosome, so it will not produce correct menin, and the loss of protein, loss of protein will allows the tumors to develop. And not every patient has the family history of MEN1, as mutation can arise as a new in individuals. So this is not linked with the family. This is not inherited disease. This is not familial disease. This arises on its own. So this is an individual. It has individual characteristic. Means this is not linked with the inheritance, not related to the genes. This is not transmitted. This does not runs in family. So this is a new sort of condition which involves multiple areas or organs in your body. Sign and symptoms of this disease is the three endocrine tumors which constitute the main one are number one primary hyperparathyroidism. And the vast majority of the patient with MEN1 will have problems with overactivity of the parathyroid gland by the age of 50 years. And we have read about the primary hyperparathyroidism. I told you that parathyroid are small, tiny glands behind the posterior aspect of the thyroid molecule, thyroid gland. So thyroid is a structure on the neck in front of the esophagus and below the laryngeal cartilage. And the function of parathyroid gland is there are three functions that this is controlling the levels of calcium phosphate in our body, and this is acting on the and parathyroid function is linked with the intestinal function, renal function, and your skin function. And we talked about that when the ultraviolet rays from the sun they fall on the skin, there is production of 7-dehydrocholesterol, which is converted into 125 dihydroxycalciferol. So, and this 125 then it enters by the bloodstream, it goes to the kidney and liver, and there are enzymes like in the liver, there are enzyme 25 hydroxylase, and in the kidney, there is 125 dihydroxycolase. These are the enzymes which are converting, which are regulating the levels of calcium absorption and phosphate excretion. So whenever there is disturbance of this function of the thyroid gland, so what will happen? All the organs which are linked with this parathyroid functioning, like liver, our intestine, our kidneys, and skin, they will be affected. So this, as this is involving the primary means the lesion is inside the parathyroid gland, and the most common I told you is adenoma tumors. Parathyroid tumors are the primary causes of hyperparathyroidism. So they affect the people over the age of 50 years. And when these symptoms arise, one should think about men one disease too. So all the organs linked, all the silent symptoms which are linked with the liver, skin, kidney, and your renal function, they are linked with the silent symptoms are linked with the primary parathyroidism. This overproduction of parathyroid hormone result in high calcium level. I told you it acts on the bone, osteocytes, and when there is hyperparathyroidism, its function is more on the osteoclastic activity rather than on the osteoblastic activity. We know that in the bone there are two types of cells. Osteoblasts, they are bone forming cells, and osteoclast, they are bone destroying the cells. So when there is hyperparathyroid, so it acts on the osteoclastic cells. They release more calcium outside the bone. There are more chances of osteoporosis, and their level rise in the high calcium level. They are seen in the blood and urine after testing. Symptoms include when this is a trace element. Calcium and phosphate are trace elements. They are linked with each other. When calcium is high, phosphate is low, and then phosphate is high, calcium is low. So they counter each other. So symptoms include when there is high calcium level in the blood. The symptoms include tiredness, depression. There would be stomach ulcers, abdominal pain because increased calcium level. Now you will think about increased calcium levels. What are the side effects of increased calcium levels? And you will think about that when there is increased calcium level in the body, it will deposit on certain areas, like it can deposit on the pituitary gland in the brain on different areas, and wherever it will get deposit, it will show the symptoms. So in the lungs, it will show opacification, calcifications. In the kidneys, it will form stones. In the liver, there is also calcification around the liver parenchyma, and it can form stones in the bile duct. Then in the gut, there will be increased excretion of the calcium, so it will slow down the motility of the gut. So these all are the symptoms with increased calcium level. So these are the they will, when there is increased calcium level, increased specification of in certain areas, so it causes abdominal pain and non-specific aches and pains in the body. And if this is left untreated, it can result in osteoporosis. I told you the reason of osteoporosis due to the overactivity of osteoclast. And kidney stones are also found, and there very rarely patients with men 1 may have a parathyroid cancer. So parathyroid cancer is one of the cause of the primary hyperparathyroidism too. I told you the most common cause is adenoma, and cancer is rare cause, but it do occur in some cases. Then, when the pituitary tumors, in case of pituitary tumors, 30 to 40% of the patients with MEN1 they develop pituitary tumors, and these tumors they produce excess hormones. And I told you there are two parts of the pituitary gland, anterior pituitary and posterior pituitary, and 80% of the anterior pituitary gland this is doing the function of releasing growth hormone. There are growth hormone receptors, and rest of the 20% they are busy in making ACTH, then MSH, FSH, LH. These LH is not produced here, but rest of the function 20% is taken up by the other hormones. But 80% of the pituitary gland is of the anterior part is producing growth hormone tumors. So when there is a pituitary tumor, so what will happen? The growth hormone will be affected the most. The most common functional pituitary tumors diagnosed in patients with MEN1 are prolactinomas. Prolactin is a hormone which should be in a balanced state, but if its level rises, this is linked with the follicle stimulating hormone and luteinizing hormone. This is linked with the follicle stimulating hormone and luteinizing hormone. So they occur in 20% of the patient. So in prolactinomas, what happens that FSH and LH will get disturbed. So in men, it will cause erectile dysfunctions and infertility, and in female there is menorrhagia, infertility, and menstrual disorders. So they occur in 20% of the patient, and these tumors they produce excess prolactin, and all the hormones which are counter-regulated by the prolactin hormone they will get disturbed. And in females, prolactinomas may cause breast milk production. Prolactin is a hormone which is linked with the breast milk production without pregnancy. So if there is prolactinoma, so without pregnancy there will be a production of the milk by the female, and lack of male or female both, and lack of periods, and may lead to infertility. I told you before. In men, prolactinomas can cause impotence and infertility. So these are the effects on the human body when there is pituitary tumor. So most commonly involved area is prolactin is in the posterior part of the pituitary tumor, but if it develops in anterior part, it will affect mostly the growth hormone. So all the areas which are acted upon by the growth hormone, and where every cell of the body is under the control of growth hormone, so they will be affected. But most commonly it occurs in posterior part, so prolactin is one of the hormone by the posterior part. Less commonly, the effects are the patient they develop hormone-producing tumors, including those making growth hormone. These are less. I told you in previous slide that if these tumors they occur in the anterior part, then it will affect the growth hormone. But this affects mostly the posterior part of the pituitary gland. But if rarely they do occur in the anterior part, growth hormone will affected, and it will result if there is excessive production of growth hormone. I told you that if it occurs before the uh, union of the your ossification plates, so it will cause acromegaly, and if it occur after the union, then it will cause another condition of the growth hormone, but acromegaly is most common. And and the cells which are making adrenocorticotropic hormone, because adrenocorticotropic hormone this is acting on the adrenal glands. We will talk about adrenal glands next week. So adrenal corticotropic hormone is controlling the release of adrenal corticosteroid hormone. So this will result when ACTH is more, so more cortisol will be released by the adrenal gland, and it will result in Cushing disease. Pituitary tumors that do not release hormones are non-functioning pituitary tumors, and they may be picked up incidentally by routine surveillance scans, and CT scan is the best test which is performed for the diagnosis of these tumors. And large pituitary tumors may cause problems with vision and headaches. I told you this pituitary is a tiny gland behind the optical nerve, and this is lying behind your optical cup, the in the skull, behind the skull, in the, where your eyes are there. So behind the eyes there is a small area which is connected with the arytenoid sinus too. I told you the anatomy before in my previous slides. So the, if that area is involved and tumor is there, so it will have a pressure effect on the optic nerve. So it will cause disturbance in the vision and headache. So their detection is done by CT scan of the CT scan is a good test to for its diagnosis or early diagnosis. Next is pancreatic endocrine tumors. We are talking one by one each and every organ which is getting involved after the getting disturbed by these tumors. So pancreatic endocrine neuroendocrine tumors, these are called NETs. NETs. NETs stand for neuroendocrine tumors, and these tumors occur in up to 60% of the patient within one, and may be functional and non-functional. So, if they are functional, they are making different hormones characterized by different symptoms, and if they are non-functional, they will make different hormones. If they are functional, obviously they will affect on the alpha cell, beta cell, sigma cells, which are present in the pancreas. I told you that alpha cells are making the glucagon, beta cells are making insulin, and sigma cells are polypeptide hormones. So all these hormones, if any of the part, it depends upon which part of the cell is getting involved. So according to the involvement of the cells, they will produce symptoms. Like if they are affecting the beta cells, so what will happen? Patient will have diabetes mellitus. If they are having the affecting the alpha cells, glucagon will be more. So glucagon function is to reduce insulin, reduce blood sugar level and gluconeogenesis. So patient will repeatedly go into hypoglycemic attack, and which is very dangerous and injurious and life-threatening condition. And if they are non-functional, so they will not matter a lot, but depends upon the site and the pressure effect on which these tumors are present. So pancreatic and neuroendocrine tumors are another cause. Gastrinomas, these are most common functioning pancreatic neuroendocrine tumors in N1, and they occur in 40% of the patient. Which I told you that pancreatic endocrine, they occur in 60% of the patient. 40% of the patient, they get gastrinomas, and the excess secretion of gastrin by the gastrinoma, and they causes the overproduction of acid in the stomach. So gastric glands are present in the stomach, and when they are there, they produce their major role is to produce hydrochloric acid, and this during churning action of the stomach, they are hydrochloric acid is produced, and they mix the food with the food, and they help in the digestion. Later on, when the food passes on, moves towards duodenum, other secretions like liver bile secretion, then pancreatic secretion, they are mixing with it, and they are changing the pH of the food. So gastrinomas, when they are there, they produce more hydrochloric acid, and they are leading to the stomach and duodenal ulcer. You know, when hydrochloric acid should be in a its homeostasis is very important to maintain the epithelial lining of the gastric gland, stomach, if they are produced in more. So hydrochloric acid, the excessive hydrochloric acid secretion, it erodes the lining of the stomach epithelia. So there will be ulcers, either gastric ulcers or duodenal ulcer, depending upon the amount of acid production. So if there are duodenal ulcers, they are known as Zinger-Ellis syndrome, and patients can present with severe bleeding, and with their ulcers they can erode the lining till the, and they will reach the there will be erosion of the epithelia, and they will be bleeding. So these patients, they will present with bleeding ulcers, and they develop strictures after of the upper gastrointestinal tract with the diarrhea, as well as diarrhea will be there. So GI symptoms will be more prominent in these patients. 40% of these patients are having gastrinoma, 60% are having pancreatic pancreatic neuroendocrine tumors. So this is also a very life-threatening lesion and not a good status. Insulinoma, they occur in 10% of the patient with NEN1. Insulinoma means they are the tumors of beta cells of the pancreas and there is overproduction of the insulin. I told you before that they cause a low blood sugar level, hypoglycemia, which is not a good state because glucose is compulsory for neuronal cell functioning. So when there is hypoglycemia and neurons, they if more than 1 to 2 one more than 1 minute if the neuronal cell remain in hypoglycemic state, what happens, neurons die forever. So hypoglycemia is not a good condition and the symptoms are typically sweating, shakiness, hunger, dizziness, anxiety, but they can progress to confusion and even loss of consciousness. Patient will go into coma, and if you so one of the emergency situation is most of the patient, diabetic patient or other patients, they come into coma. So, yeah, and this is safe to give them 25% dextrose water immediately intravenously rather than to wait for their lab test. You should give it 25%. Hyperglycemia is better than hypoglycemia. Hyperglycemia is never killing, but hypoglycemia is a killing condition. So when you see a patient is going into coma or unconscious or anxiety, headache, you should give some sweet to the patient so that its blood sugar level will go up and your conscious level will be regained. Rarely, other functioning pancreatic neuroendocrine tumors can occur in men1, and these include glucagonoma. I told you it depends upon the cells involved. So when they are involving the alpha cells of the pancreas, they are producing glucagon, increased production of glucagon, and these can glucagon is counteracting the insulin action. I told you the main action of glucagon is to reduce the blood sugar level, to reduce the gluconeogenesis. So these can cause skin rashes, weight loss, and diabetes mellitus, as well as fatigue, shortness of breath, and lightheadedness as a consequence of anemia. And VIPomas are these. This is the overproduction of vasoactive intestinal peptide by VIPoma. It can cause severe diarrhea, watery diarrhea, and when there is diarrhea, there is loss of electrolytes out of the body. So what will happen? The muscles will get weak, and there is muscle weakness, fatigue, lethargy, palpitations. Obviously, our heart is also a muscle, so there is palpitation due to low potassium level, and patient can go into coma. So immediately when a patient is in, if you find a patient in unconscious state, you should immediately send his labs for serum electrolytes like serum sodium, potassium, chloride, bicarb. These levels should be done. Their blood sugar level is very urgent to get done, and by doing it while they are you are sending the labs to the for testing, you should give him or her immediately 25% dextrose water, so that if there is hypoglycemia, the condition, as I told you, hypoglycemia is more killing than hyperglycemia. So the if there is hypoglycemia, this is not there is no harm in giving glucose to the patient. It doesn't matter if he or she is diabetic, but hyper is safe than hypo. So these levels should be done. So how common is multiple endocrine neoplasia type 1? This is a rare condition and it has been estimated that it affects between 1 in 10,000 to 1 in 30,000 people. This is not a common condition. As I told you, diabetes mellitus is a very common condition. Every third person has diabetes or fourth person. So this is a common condition and genetically linked and runs in families and strong. There are also environmental factors for developing diabetes mellitus like obesity, lack of exercise, then sedentary habits, eating more fat, sugar, putting on weight, and blah blah. These are the conditions which are causing diabetes. But this is uncommon condition and it occur in 1 in 10,000 people. Is multiple endocrine neoplasia type 1 is inherited? I told you this is an inheriting condition due to an abnormality or mutation in the genes. In some patients, this is not found the inherited defect. I told you in the first slide, but it can be passed from one parent to child. This is inherited as an autosomal dominant condition. There are two types of condition: autosomal dominant and autosomal recessive. If this is autosomal dominant condition, so it will run in each family. Like if the parent have autosomal dominant, you can get this condition, and your child will get a condition, and next generations will get in each generation one child will get this condition. So this is autosomal dominant condition. But as there are mutations occur, and this is also auto sort of mutation. This does not depend upon the inherited condition. Sometimes it can occur in another way. So this is not compulsory that if there is this is in a family, it will not happen in another family, but it can happen because this mutation arises on its own. There is no not a criteria. So this means that this is not a sex-linked condition, and there is 50% chance that a child will inherit the abnormal gene, and therefore when one he will develop N1. About 10% of the patients with N1 do not have a family history and are the first people to develop a mutation in their family. As I was telling you this thing before, that this is not compulsory that if this is running in the family, you because there are 50% chance you might not get that gene. So if you get that gene, then you will develop this disease. You are not having that gene, this will not happen. How is multiple endocrine neoplasia type 1 is diagnosed? So the only test for diagnosing is genetic testing. Genetic testing is the only test which will diagnose when one. Multiple endocrine neoplasia type 2. This is 2A is a hereditary syndrome, and this is characterized by medullary carcinoma of the thyroid, pheochromocytoma, parathyroid hyperplasia or adenomas causing hyperparathyroidism, and occasionally cutaneous lichen amyloidosis. So these are the conditions in which the MEN2 condition develop, and the clinical features they depend upon the glandular elements affected. Familial medullary thyroid carcinoma is a distinct variant of MEN2A, and diagnosis obviously involves the genetic testing. Hormonal and imaging tests can help to indicate the tumors which are removed surgically, and their treatment is to remove the tumor surgical. Surgical resection is the only treatment for these tumors. Obviously, if a patient has a tumor anywhere, the only answer for this treatment is surgical resection. So, and testing is genetic testing, and it depends upon what site and how much big is the tumor. So, the sign and symptoms will be according to the site and size of the tumor. Diagnosis is based upon the when you take the history by examination of the patient, by her or his clinical symptoms, clinical suspicion. Then you go for genetic testing, serum calcium level, parathyroid hormone level, plasma free metanephrines, and urinary catecholamines levels. These all levels they tell you about the condition status of the body. Then pheochromocytoma is localization. Pheochromocytoma is a tumor in the adrenal gland, and its localization is done by CT scan or MRI. I told you MRI and CT scan are the only only test which can be done. So with this, we finished the multiple endocrine neoplasia topic. This today it was a small topic, but this is very important, and this is linked with multiple diseases. So, any questions you have plenty of time. to discuss any problem regarding previous lectures. We have talked about starting from the pituitary gland, growth hormone, thyroid gland, parathyroid gland, then pancreas, diabetes mellitus. Up till now, we have finished with all these topics. Next week, inshallah, we will start with the adrenal gland, and this is also one of the vital organ and very important. Diseases are linked with this gland. This is a tiny gland situated at the upper pole of the kidneys, and interesting topic. So, if you have any question, please feel free to ask me regarding any of the previous topic. Not today's topic. You can ask any of the questions starting from the pituitary and all the topics up till now we have covered. Yes, ulcers. They when the ulcer, the hydrochloric acid secretion is there, it can cause either the gastric ulcer or the duodenal ulcer. So when this is involving the duodenum, this condition is called Zullinger-Ellison syndrome. And when the ulcer, when you take medicine and it heals on its own or by the medicine, so what happens whenever you get a scar on your skin? What happens? It shrinks in size. So there is fibrosis and it reduces in size. So whenever there is reduction in the size and fibrosis, it causes stricture. Stricture means narrowing of the path. So and causes diarrhea because of the imbalance of electrolytes. Diarrhea, GI symptoms are there, and most common symptoms are nausea, vomiting, diarrhea is the most common symptom. So there is imbalance of the electrolyte. Diarrhea is the first manifestation of one of those causes. Got it? Strictures are causing narrowing of the lumen. Yes, this effect is there, but the normal functioning of the intestine and motility. You are not your normal fecal matter is in the semi-solid or solid form. You got it. And this is the normal functioning of the intestine. So if the gut is not functioning normally, the abnormal part will be diarrhea, because you are not all the time constipated. You are having regular stool on your timings, and they are semi-form. They are soft. They are not hard. If it is hard, it means there is deficiency of the water, or you are taking some sort. Your motility is reduced, so the patient get constipation. But if you are having diarrhea, so diarrhea means there is disturbance in the motility, in the release of hormones. The hormones like catecholamines, they are controlling the function of the gut. So the GI function is upset. So diarrhea is the first manifestation, not the constipation. Diarrhea means the passage is how will you pass the bolus from the narrow part? Your food is not getting into the duodenum and rest of the gut. So the that area will be narrowed, and food will after churning action of the stomach, the food is diluted multiple times. So it will come out in a liquid form, and you will have diarrhea. And there are many other disturbances going on, like electrolytes, water balance is not good. Your hormones are not taking up the that function of gut. So patient develops diarrhea. Alijas, did you get it? Did you get my point? In prolactinomas, what happened if breast will come without pregnancy? Prolactin is a hormone which is controlling the prolactin. If this is normal, because this hormone is linked with the follicle stimulating hormone and luteinizing hormone, and this is secreted from the neuronal cells above in the stalk of the pituitary gland. So when there is tumor and increased production of prolactin level, and this is also has a receptors on the breast mammary glands in the breast. So when their function is increased, they will come in the bloodstream and will get attached in the on the receptors of the mammary gland. They will develop more, and there will be milk production because prolactin is responsible for making milk. So without pregnancy, even without pregnancy, they will start their function because there is hyperactivity of the glands, and hyperactivity whenever there is hyperactivity of the gland, so they will make more secretions. So milk is number one. Because prolactin gland is responsible for milk production, so milk will be produced rather than any other secretion. So even without pregnancy, the he or she, this is not the condition of the female, even males can develop can produce milk. So prolactinoma is a condition, and their breast will develop. In males, the breast development will occur because of hyperprolactinemia. Got it? Yes, genetic testing is the answer. CT scan is another test. CT scan, genetic testing. Genetic testing is not doing normally, but first of all, you will go for CT scan of the brain. CT scan will tell you that there is some small growth or lesion, intracranial lesion there. So after finding the lesion, we will go into the detail which lesion is it involving the which area. Then further detailed CT scan is done. Contrast CT scan is done. Contrast will tell you which area is involved. First of all, simple CT scan, then contrast CT scan will tell you the area and limitations of that growth in the brain. So this will differentiate. Then further to go into detailed investigation, we will go for hormones. Obviously, if we are suspecting that this growth is in the prolactin in the pituitary gland, so we will immediately think about that this is the gland which is releasing hormones. So I have this symptoms, or this patient has this symptoms. So this might be due to that cause. So we will go for the hormonal level. Then hormonal level, genetic testing, these all are the testing. And one by one we will reach till towards our diagnosis. There is a long list of laboratory tests which we go. First of all, we go for simple tests. Then we'll go into the minute details of the test to reach the final diagnosis. In genetic testing is the final diagnosis. Got it? Any other question, girls, boys, except Ali Chance? Rest of the people, boys, please share your questions. Any confusions? Girls, any questions? Rest of the boys, please wake up, ask me questions. This is not a simple subject. You should have multiple questions in your mind. You're not asking. Endocrine is a very interesting topic, but this is not so simple. Please ask question. Any other question? Girls, wake up. Guys, please ask me question. You still have a time. 20 minutes are there. I made this topic short because I thought that you would ask me something regarding the previous topics, but you are not. Yes, class, please ask. Okay, if you're not asking, I'll ask you question. So, what is the, tell me the single most test, which is if you doubt about the thyroid function of a patient. So, what will you, how will you proceed your investigations? Like, if we suspect that a patient is having hyper or hypothyroid, we get his or her TSH done. After that, which is the single most important test which will tell you about the hypothyroid status of the body? Please tell me. No, TSH, I told you TSH will tell you hypo or hyper. But if a patient has TSH level normal, so will you label him or her normal euthyroid gland? No, TSH is not the definitive test. This is only for advanced cases. So if a patient might have be having hypothyroid status with the TSH level normal. So in that case, we will go for pre T4 level. Pre T4 level is the single most test which will tell you whether the patient is hypo or hyperthyroid. TSH is the initial test. It do tell us because we routinely we go for TSH level, but thyroid is protein bound and pre status. So pre status of thyroid hormone is the more relevant one, which will tell you the hypo or hyperthyroid. You may get a patient that is having hypothyroid symptoms, but his or her TSH level is normal. So what will you do? You will go for pre T4 level. Pre T4 level is the next test which you will go through. What are the common causes of hypothyroidism? Yes, primary cause. Primary cause. Name the condition. No, primary in primary cause, primary you are right with the primary cause, but in primary cause there are a number of conditions like primary autoimmune. Autoimmune comes the Hashimoto's thyroiditis. This is the most common condition in Pakistan. Hashimoto's mean this is autoimmune deficiency, and autoimmune deficiency. This is not treatable, and you for this you will have to take thyroxine lifelong. But there are certain other conditions in which there is thyroiditis. Itis means inflammation. In that case, you will patient will take only for 6 to 12 weeks thyroxine tablets, and if he or she regains her status normal, then we will withdraw the medicine. Uh, this in that case, thyroxine is not the lifelong treatment. And what is the most common condition of hyperthyroidism? In hypothyroid, we talked about there are autoimmune conditions, Hashimoto's thyroiditis, then surgical resection. This is another condition. Genetically linked. This is another condition. Then there is calcifications or certain medicines. They and at what time thyroxine should be taken? Do you know it? This is interesting question. This is not a question, but I will tell you that whenever a patient is prescribed for thyroxine tablet, in hypothyroid cases, patient is prescribed thyroxine tablets. So the best time for taking that medicine is number one, that the medicine should be taken empty stomach, early morning, before meal, 30 minutes before meal, and it should not be taken with any other medicine. Either you are taking for other illnesses, if you are taking some medicines. So certain people, they take each tablet on their palm and they swallow it, all the tablets together. This is not the way of taking medicine. So thyroxine is such a tablet that it should be taken all alone, not with any other medicine, and in with empty stomach. In this way, its efficacy is improved and its action is full, and it elicit full action on the body. So this is the best way to taking thyroxine. If in your families, if somebody is taking thyroxine, please give him or her this advice that it should be taken this way. Okay, what are the common conditions of hyperthyroidism? Yes, Graves' disease is number one, and there is another list of hyperthyroidism like tumors, certain tumors, and primary causes, secondary causes, And tell me the difference between the primary, secondary, and tertiary hyperparathyroidism. What is tertiary hyperparathyroidism? What is tertiary hyperparathyroidism? Anyone? Guys, anyone will answer me what is tertiary hyperparathyroidism? Primary hyperparathyroidism is when the cause is lying in the parathyroid gland, and the uh, single most cause is adenoma. Secondary hyperparathyroidism is when the cause is lying away from the uh, parathyroid gland, and the reason is chronic renal failure is the most common one cause for secondary hyperparathyroidism. And tertiary hyperparathyroidism is when there is resistance developed. Parathyroid hormone is normal, but there is resistance developed on the cells, tissue cells. Cells are not responding to the parathyroid level. This is tertiary parathyroidism. Any other question, guys? You still have 12 minutes. Any question, class? Please wake up. Any other question? Okay, tell me the causes of hyperpituitarism. Causes of hyperpituitarism. Yes, local causes. What are the local causes? Yes, cellular expansion. Any other? Tumors. Yes. Erosion. Tumors. Yeah, tumor is the most common cause in local causes. Okay, tell me the difference between type 1 and type 2 diabetes mellitus. When we were reading about the thyroid gland, I forgot to tell you the biosynthesis of thyroid hormone. So there are few steps in the biosynthesis of thyroid hormone. These are written in your books. Please go through those steps. They are important from examination point of view. There are 5 6 steps that there are parafollicular cells in the thyroid glands, then the action of the enzymes on that cells, entry of the trace elements, iodization, then thyroglobulin production. These are the steps which are written in your book. Please go through those steps. These are 5 6 steps. Step 1, step 2, step 3, step 4, step 5, 6, 7 steps are there. So you should know about what are the steps involved in the biosynthesis of thyroxine. Yes, and this is good answer in type 1 and 2. Good. This is Maria Salim. Yes, is type 1 is treatable? Treatable? How do you treat type 1 diabetes? Yes, insulin is the only treatment for type 1 diabetes because the cells are not producing insulin, insulin is absent. So we will give natural insulin, and this is the best treatment for the patient for type 1. And what is the treatment of type 2 diabetes? Suppose if a patient comes to you that he is has developed these are the symptoms for diabetes. So you label him type 2 diabetes. What will you say? You will immediate. What will you do? What is the number one step? Which will you will advise to the patient? Not hypoglycemic agent are not immediately advised. First of all, for 3 months, you advise the patient, you look at the patient, take the history. If he or she is overweight, you will tell him or her about the modification in her lifestyle, like reduction of weight, doing regular exercises, regular walk, and diet control, diabetic diet. So these are the first treatment steps. You will not immediately give him the hypoglycemic agent. This is not the good prescription. So you will advise for good 3 to 4 months. The patient will do regular exercises, control his diet. If he is taking too much sugar, should not take sugar too much. And you will tell him the diabetic diet chart, which include Low and pulpy foods should not be taken, and increased sugar intake should be restricted, or small amount of sugar should be taken. High carbohydrate diet should not be taken. High protein diet should not be taken. Each you should modify his diet. So diet control, regular exercises, regular walk, these things most of the patient they maintain their blood sugar level on these things. Then if after 3 4 months the patient is not regulating his or her blood sugar, then you will go for hypoglycemic agent. And the best hypoglycemic agent are the metformin. We start with the metformin. No, Maria, hypoglycemic agent, I told you, we will give after 3 or 4 months. First of all, there is modification in the lifestyle. After that, we will think about by getting his or her blood sugar level done, fasting level done. We will go for hypoglycemic agent, not directly to insulin. Insulin, although, because this is insulin resistance in type 2, not the deficiency. In type 1, we give insulin, not in type 2. We start with metformin, which is most commonly known as glucophage, because glucophage, I told you the insulin action on the striated muscles, liver, and fat cells. What is that doing? So we will go for metformin. Sulfonylurea is number two option. Sulfonylurea is number two option after metformin. If the condition is not setting, if the blood sugar level is not controlling by metformin, then we will go for sulfonylurea. Is the number two choice, because sulfonylureas are notorious in causing hypoglycemia. So these are number two choice for the patient. Number one is metformin. Yes, Mohammed Zubair, yes, you are right. New glycemic agent metformin. We are still left with 3 minutes. Any other question? Any other query in your mind? You see that this endocrinology is a subject that if you are good in this subject, you can deal with any of the condition of the body. You are a perfect doctor if you go through the endocrine properly. Please do read this subject very attentively, because this is the only system which is controlling, because endocrine is controlling our whole body. If you go into the detail, you will come to know that endocrine is controlling our body. So if you are fail in this subject, you will fail in your medicine. You cannot deal a patient. Okay, guys, with this we finish with our topic for today. I hope you will, on the weekend, you will go through this subject properly. And if you do have any questions, please write it down. And we, inshallah, next week we will start with adrenal gland. Good luck to you. Stay home, stay safe. Allah Hafiz. Okay, there is another question. Can insulin be induced in the anti-diabetic regime at the terminal stages of type 2 diabetes when the drugs are not responding? Yes, if other drugs are not responding, then we will go for, there are a number of medicines for type 2 diabetes. Like I told you, metformin is number one choice, sulfonylurea is number two choice. Then there are certain anti-lantin. I told you the lantin hormones, which are produced from the proximal terminal alien. So certain medicines they act on that. After trying this, if the patient is not responding, then we will go for insulin. Yes, if all these medicines are not responding, then in the end we will not directly to the insulin. This is not the right approach. Okay. So good luck to you. Allah Hafiz. Time is finished.